I got this letter, and something you guys don't know about like me is like I grew up like having a restraining order against my father. It actually just expired, and all through college like I got these letters, and like I don't think anyone's going to show up here, but like I just need to like make you aware of this. And he basically just like stared me straight in the face and didn't know what to say. So I actually went to the police every single time I got a letter. So I went to the police in New York where I grew up. I went to the police in Indiana. I went to the police in London. I was basically building a case in case something happened to me. And the realization of that was very scary.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with Heather, who was just 17 when she received a letter in the mail from an unknown family friend, accusing her of having a drinking problem that her late mother would be ashamed of.
Over the next few years, the letters grew more disturbing as the unknown family friend taunted her with details about what her college campus looked like and threatened to approach her there.
Heather left the U.S. to study abroad in London and came back to her dorm room to find a letter telling her that her mother had originally wanted an abortion and that her family didn't love her.
She eventually moved back to the States, where her nightmare continues to this day. Heather, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
What was life like growing up for you?
Life was interesting growing up. I lived with my parents until I was about 10, and then when I was 10 my mom passed away, which was obviously very difficult. And then shortly after that, I was adopted by my cousin and her husband, so I had a little bit of a household change. What was tricky about that is that it wasn't just like under the radar. It was very much involved with like the state and the court. So honestly, I had a really good childhood.
What was life like for you right before you met your stalker?
Life was pretty good. I felt like I had been at the new high school I transferred to for about 3 years. I was in my senior year of high school, and things were pretty normal. I was, a straight A student. I was president of like 5 or 6 different clubs. I was studying my butt off for the SATs. I just, it was pretty normal. I had an after-school job and had dinner with my parents every night, hung out with my friends on the weekend. Was obviously obsessed with like One Direction, like every other like senior in high school in 2013. But things were really normal.
How did you realize you had a stalker? What happened first?
It was very abrupt for me. I remember I was coming home from school, and I was always the first one to get home since I had a car, and my little siblings were in after school care and my parents were at work. So I had a doctor's appointment, and I ran home to grab a snack, and I absentmindedly just thought to check the mail because it was college season. So I was getting all this paperwork from colleges, and I was always really anxious to check the mail in a good way because there was always something new where I had already gotten a few acceptances. So I checked the mail, and there was an envelope that was all typed out with my name on it and no return address. But at the time I was 17 and I didn't really think much of it. I thought someone had just forgotten to put a return address on it. And I opened it up and I found this typed letter that I remember going to my room and just sitting down and reading it for a second. And as I was reading it, I thought it was a joke. Like one of my friends like played a prank on me or something was going on. But I remember thinking like, this is so weird. Like it says Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Like that's so odd. And then as I kept reading it, started to say some really nasty things about my family and doubting the person I was. And then I kind of realized that I was in hot water and just decided to tell my parents about it when I got home that night. And I got in the car, drove to the doctor's appointment, went to the doctor's appointment, and just honestly, I knew in my heart that it was going to be a problem. So just tried to tune it out for a couple hours until I had to deal with it.
Oh. How did they react when you first told them about the letter?
I remember my dad being like, oh, shit, because unbeknownst to me, there had been another one that had come that my parents had tucked away, thinking it was a one-off instance and something like it wouldn't happen again. With everything that happened with my real father, I was in and out of court with him, and there was just a lot of stuff that was coming through that my parents, they didn't hide information from me, but they also knew that I was 17 and wanted to know everything, and that knowing everything probably wasn't good for me as a high schooler trying to go to school and be normal. We sat down and my parents, their key place was always like, can you come into the kitchen for a second? And you always knew you were in trouble if that happened. And I remember thinking that I was in really deep trouble. And my dad just was kind of like, ugh. And my mom just looked at him and was like, pull it together. And they let me know that one had come right around my birthday. And, you know, I immediately looked at them and was like, what? And they were like, they showed it to me and said, you know, well, tomorrow we have to go down to the police station. And I remember being like, that's very extreme. Like, we do not need to involve other people in this. Like, this is our family drama. We'll work it out. It's fine. And they were just like, no, this is what we're doing. Tomorrow's a Saturday. Wake up, go get some coffee. We're going to go do this. And that's when I realized that it was a little more serious than I had previously thought. I think my mom had wanted to go to the police earlier if I know her as well as I think I do. But knowing pretty much, I mean, I'm pretty sure they came from within my family. So knowing that the background of everything that had happened there, I don't think it was like I'm in danger. It was more just like, this is harassment at that point.
What did the police say when you got there?
Well, what's funny is, I mean, we're friends with the basically entire police force. I live in a really small town where I remember like being in high school and a cop busting up a party and then going to a barbecue with my parents the next day and him being like, hey, and me being like, hi. I'm just trying to not talk to him. So they were just like, hey guys, what's up? And I hung back because I don't think I realized it at that point, but I was really stressed about the situation and I was just really anxious about it and I wanted it to be over. I constantly try to like minimize things that are messy or stressful in my life. And my mom kind of just handed them the stuff. And I thought it was going to be a simple, like, here, make a photocopy, give it back, we're going to go. And they were like, okay, just come on to the back. And I was like, this does not need to happen. We do not need to go to the back. Like, we can do this from here. And my mom was like, no, we need to go. And we talked to them. And, you know, my mom kind of took the reins on that one. Honestly, I just kind of sat there and waited for it to be over at that point. That was before I kind of had to do that bidding for myself.
Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals?
We often discuss mental health during Strictly Stalking and the importance of getting help when you need it. There are a lot of changes going on in our country and the world that can feel overwhelming.
BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist, and you can start communicating in under 48 hours.
It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional counseling done securely online. There's a broad range of expertise available which may not be locally available in many areas.
The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy.
BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today.
Visit their website and read their testimonials that are posted daily. One BetterHelp user wrote that her counselor, Carolyn, demonstrates kindness and empathy in all interactions. It's safe to speak, even though she has trouble opening up. They gently prod those tender places that she has difficulty in looking at.
Visit BetterHelp.com/stalking. That's better, H-E-L-P, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states.
Strictly Stalking listeners will get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/stalking.
We'd like to give a special shout out and thank you to our newest Patreon members, Rachel and Priscilla. Thank you so much for joining us on Patreon.
When did you piece together that it could be somebody within your family?
That was never really a secret for me. So at that point, I'd had a restraining order against my father, or I guess technically it's called an order of protection, but it's basically, you know, he was not allowed to contact me. He had to stay away from me. And he had, you know, violated some of that before, where like he showed up to my National Honor Society induction and just little things like that, where I think I always knew it was him just from a couple of things. Like, one, having someone in your life who isn't allowed to legally contact you when you get an anonymous letter, who else would it really be from? And then also just the details of what the letter said. Like, I knew the second I read it. It was just, you know, disparaging my parents and, you know, my father has a drinking problem. So the fact that I was being accused of having a drinking problem was very much on brand for like that sort of belief. I think he harbors the belief that my family conspired to like take me from him. And all of that was very in line with what the letter said. So I pretty much knew the second I read it.
Did your mom and dad think you were in danger?
We've gone back and forth on that a little bit. I think it was more the danger of, if he's going to go this far, is he going to show up somewhere he is drinking? Is he going to, lash out about something? And I think an important piece of that puzzle is that the reason why I was taken out by the state is because the alcoholism had led to some physical abuse that wasn't malicious. I don't think he ever intended, he wasn't just going to come home and be like, I feel like hitting my daughter, but it was just me trying to put myself between him and a door, me trying to put myself between him and driving a car, that I think that kind of clouded his judgment. So I think that was my parents' concern of like, if he shows up and he has been drinking and, someone tries to get in the way or I try to run away, like it's just really unpredictable to know what an addict's going to do.
What happened after you left the police station?
I went home and my parents were always really nice to me about it. They asked me what I wanted for dinner that night. So that was a nice little silver lining, is like I got to choose what we had for dinner. And I just remember my mom being like, do you want to talk about it? And honestly, at that point in my life and consistently through that, all I've ever wanted to do is just have a normal life. And for a long time, I just didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I just wanted to push it down and pretend it wasn't there. And that was honestly a big source of fighting between me and my parents. It was them being like, you have to like realize this, and me being like, nope, I'm good. I'm fine. And so I just, I think that day my parents were like, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, no. And I went over to a friend's house, but I don't think I was 100% there that day. But they kind of just let me take the day to do what I wanted to do, with the understanding that we would have to talk about it later. And I think at dinner that night, they were just like, this is the reality of the situation. This is what's going to have to happen. We need to figure out how this information is getting there. And I remember my mom was like, maybe you should delete your Facebook. And at 17 years old, I was like, I would literally rather die than delete my Facebook. And which obviously, looking back at 25, is the stupidest thing ever. But there were a lot of conversations about trying to restrict that, like the access to that information as well.
And when did you get the next letter then?
I got one around my senior prom. And I think it was actually an email, now that I think about it, but the email address was like untraceable. And I tried to like figure out how to trace an email. So I definitely had some communication. Honestly, I can't remember if it was an email or a letter, but I went off to college. I went to Notre Dame in Indiana, which was pretty far away. So I did feel like a sense of peace going to Indiana, just knowing that like my dad didn't live 45 minutes away, and it was significantly more effort to take a plane or get into a car and drive to Indiana. And I got a letter within my first 2 weeks there. So that was like August or September.
What did that letter say?
That one was just like, I hear you're at college. They always started off very warmly, like, hope you're doing well, which is to me like the most ironic thing, because obviously upon reading this letter, I am not doing well. So, but it would always be like, hope you're doing well, like Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Halloween, Merry Christmas again. Like, and then it just kind of went into, knowing, where my dorm was, and it seems like you're enjoying Notre Dame. I've always wanted to go there. Maybe I'll take a visit. Like, it was just that was when I started to get a little bit more nervous, was like, oh my gosh, I'm not living in my parents' house. What do I do if I'm like walking around campus and all of a sudden he pops up? That was when I first started to be like, what if this happens?
When the letters, did they start escalating? They were all the letters were around holidays and special occasions?
Not all of them. I would say they were always around something. Like, one was when I started a new internship. One was after I ran a race. One was, one of the most messed up ones was one of my best friends in college passed away, and I got one expressing condolences for that. And so they were always around some sort of event, but it didn't have to be anything. It was like, one was like St. Patrick's Day. So it could be like any holiday or anything I did, basically.
How often were you getting these letters?
They would come in waves, which I think was one of the more stressful parts for me. Was I would go 3 or 4 months without getting one, and I would be like, okay, maybe it's over, maybe it's not going to happen again, and then they would come again. So I could get, I got 4 when I was in London, but I could, or maybe it was 3, but like I got a few in London, and then I got none when I came back, and then I got 3 in March. So it was just very like up and down.
How many different suspects at this time were you contemplating?
Um, Yeah, that's a good question. I think I always knew that whether it was my father putting pen to paper or having someone else doing his bidding, like he was the voice behind them. But what came up pretty frequently was, is he the one actually mailing them? Because when that split happened and I left and, I just asked for some time away, because I think the other thing to note too is that living situation with my cousin and her husband, that was not supposed to be permanent. Like that was not the intention. It was just, we're going to be your guardians, and then he's going to get his life together, and then you're going to go back. And I was like, great, cool. And then the more I went to therapy, the more I was like, I just need like probably 6 months of like no contact, like just let me deal with this. There had been a lot that had happened in 3 years. Like I felt like I had lost 2 parents, and I don't think I ever really processed any of that because I was 13 and trying to keep my entire household together. And it was actually, I was 11 and trying to do that. So it was really difficult. And that was when the switch sort of flipped, and it was like very hostile. And when that happened, you know, there was definitely a very divided line in the sand of people who had been in my life. And there were, I wish it didn't shake out like this, but there were people who were on my side, and then there were people who weren't. And then there were like a very select few who straddled the middle. And it was always those people who I was like, what do you know? What are you saying? How many more times do we have to have this conversation? Please don't share any information about my life. So there were definitely, my dad had a really serious girlfriend at the time. And she actually showed up to my graduation with a camcorder because there wasn't a restraining order against her. And I didn't see it, luckily, but my parents told me about it that night. And I remember everyone acting really weird. And I was like, why is everyone being so weird? So she definitely was someone who I felt like could have been actually sending them to avoid the legality of it all. And then there were just a couple people in my family too, just people who, had never really made their stance on the situation clear, despite it being like a very clear situation to have a stance on. And so I basically just made a ton of phone calls and was like, this is what's going on. I feel bad asking, but is it you? And of course, everyone said no. But, in the back of your mind, you feel like you're going crazy because you're like, I'm someone, my parents hate this about me. I mean, they love me, but they're like, you're so naive. You want to believe everyone's like a great person. You need to like, come on, like, help me help you. And I maintained the belief. I was like, no one would lie to me. And my parents were like, yes, a lot of people would lie to you. So then the more I thought about that, the more I was like, it could be anyone. And, it was just a crazy time of trying to figure out like who I could talk to about my life and who I couldn't.
When you identified who you thought your stalker would be, did you contact his enablers?
I have a family member who, was definitely like quote unquote on my side with everything, but just kind of has that mentality of like just wanting everyone to get along and feeling like this was a way to like, what does it matter if I tell him that she's doing well in school? Like, what does it matter if I tell him that she has an internship? And it's like, no, all of those things very much matter, because like, just because I'm not sitting around at Christmas, like reading these letters to the group, like does not mean that like they're not happening. So I basically, it sucked, but at like 18, I had to like make ultimatums and be like, hey, heads up, if I ever find out that you're behind any of this, like we're done. Like, so if you want to gamble on our relationship, go ahead, but like, please don't do that. And I think that, that was, I felt like such a jerk, honestly, but I think that I just had to have like very clear and explicit conversations with people and be like, hi, I know you still have contact with my father. I'm totally okay with that. Like, my intention was never to like strip him of his family and friends. Like, I always say, like, you can love someone and not want them in your life currently. And like, it was really hard for me that I felt like people had to choose a side and like we both lost relationships because of it. And it was like very painful. I had to just set the expectation of like, what we talk about is confidential. Like, you are not to say a word about me. If he asks how I am, just say she's good and move on. Like, I cannot be a part of your relationship. And I think I know, like, just from what people have told me, like, my dad was pressing people for information about me. And, like, I kind of can't blame him for that part of it, just because, like, I'm his daughter. I'm his only daughter. I understand that he wants to know about my life, but it just was such a different situation where I was like, you cannot talk about me when I'm to him. Like, you just, like, not how tall I am, not like what car I drive, like not a single thing. It could be the most minuscule thing to you, but like, it's really not to me. Like, please don't. And I just had a lot of those conversations.
Was there any truth in the letters, or was there a theme to the letters?
Here's the thing. I was 19 years old. I was in college. Was I going out with my friends and drinking? Absolutely. I was 19 in college. I had a budding social life. It was beautiful. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I was also doing totally fine in school, working. Like, I was just, for the first time, like, I had worked so hard to get into college that for the first time, I felt like I was just breathing. And I had made like really good friends. And so, like, yeah, there might have been a picture on Facebook of me holding a beer, but like, that does not translate to me having a drinking problem. And like, I've always prided myself on having a healthy relationship with that, despite having the genetic pool that says that I wouldn't. And so, like, there was truth to the fact that like it was like, you look like you're going out and partying a lot. And it's like, yeah, I kind of was, but it wasn't hurting my life in any way. And there was just also like, I think that my parents, my biological parents, had a really messy relationship. And I don't doubt, my parents were not married when I was about to be born. They got married like 5 months before I was born, I think, maybe 6. So like, I don't doubt that like there were a lot of conversations about what to do, because if I found myself in that situation, I would be having those conversations as well. But I think that there was just a lot of like shady or malicious ways of handling that information. Like, what really comes to mind is like, when my friends started getting letters, it was detailing a lot of things in my life that did happen. Like, my mom cheated on my dad when I was 7. They were about to get a divorce before she got sick. Like, all of those things are true, but the manner in which they were thrown about was just not the way I would have cheated up at all. And that's what frustrated me the most, is like, I always like look back and thank God that I was so open with my friends. Like, I'm such an open book. I don't like having secrets because they stress me out and they make me feel like they could come out at any time. But it was frustrating to me because had I not been so open with my friends, that would have been my entire life story, trauma and all, tossed to people I've known for 3 or 4 months or a year or however long. And like, that just made me really angry because that was not fair. Like, and I'm lucky that I handled the situation the way I did, but so some things were true, but there was a lot of like manipulative malice behind it.
How did you tell your friends about your stalker, and what did they say?
Yeah, so fortunately, 3 of my best friends from college were my freshman roommates. And at the time when I went to college, I had a restraining order against my dad. So I had to be like very upfront. I was like, hey guys, real heavy for the first night, but if you see this man, call 911. I handled it with as much grace and honestly humor as possible. That's always my thing. But so luckily, like, I was like, any questions you have, hit me with them now. Like, let's talk. And they were like awesome. And obviously they were like, oh my God, this is really serious, but it asked me questions. So I think having that background of like, hey, he's never respected my desire to be left alone, that when the letters came, I was like, guys, this is happening. And they were like, this is very on brand for the situation we have already heard about. And at that point, I'd already gotten a letter when I was in high school. So I told them about that. And I was like, I don't know if that's going to happen again. And they were like, very much like, okay, like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm good. So they kind of, luckily, I'd had the structure where like they knew about it. And then the only other person who wasn't in that group that had also gotten a letter was my roommate when I studied abroad, who I was close with. And like, if you want to talk about a semester where like there was evidence of me like going out and drinking, it was a country in which it was legal to do so. Like, there were like probably 100 Facebook pictures, and I was like, I don't know, like, I was just tagged in them. So I was like, I'll leave them up, I guess. But she got one, and she and I had gotten pretty close as well, to the point where I didn't tell her about the letter thing because it didn't cross my mind that one would come to London. But we had just gotten into, we were both on scholarships at Notre Dame. So we got into the subject of like, how'd you get on your scholarship? And I was like, basically I had a dumpster fire of a childhood and they gave me a bunch of money so I could go to school. And like, that was kind of how we got into that conversation. So it was a little more jarring in that circumstance for her, but she still had some background of like what was happening with the situation.
How did your friend react when she first got the letter?
My friends from college who had had all of college got them junior year. And it was right after our other good friend had passed away, unfortunately. So it was a very high tension environment, but they basically came to me and were like, hey, we have to talk to you. And like, that's not what our friend group does. So I was like, who else died? Someone needs to tell me. And they were like, no, let's go get coffee. Like, we're good. Just sit. And like, it just felt like my parents calling me into the kitchen all over again. I was like, am I in trouble? Like, did I do something wrong? Like, did I like steal someone's boyfriend? Did no one tell me? Like, but they sat me down and they were like, so we both got a letter. And I was like, oh, from who? And they were like, a letter. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my first response was like, I'm so sorry. This is not what you signed up for in a friendship with me. Like, what did they say? Are you okay? And they were awesome because their first response was like, we're fine. Are you okay? Like, we're completely okay. Like, this does not change anything in our friendship. Like, we already called your mom. She knows about them. She wanted us to talk to you. Call her when you leave here. So they were like dream friends in that scenario. And like, I'm so thankful to this day. They were just the best. But honestly, even before all that happened, like I would come home crying from the mailbox because I got a new letter, and my best friend Erica would be like, all right, let's just go get a milkshake. Like, put it down. Like, let's go. We'll come back to this later.
What did the letters to your friends say?
The letters to my friends, they were all a little bit different. So my friend is like a very like responsible person. She's like the most Christian girl I know. And so it really like leaned on her Christianity for her of like, as a good Christian, help your friend, your poor alcoholic friend whose whole family doesn't love her. Like, it was a lot. And again, like I said before, just like detailing all the details of everything that happened. And like that one encouraged her to like help me find my way, like as weird as that is. And like, it was like very backhanded because it was basically help her find her way, because here are all of the ways in which she is absolutely terrible. And here are all of the ways her life is a mess. And you need to help her, while basically exposing my entire life's history. And so that was hers. Were basically like, she had like gone on vacation with me to visit a family member of mine in California, actually. So like some of it detailed that. And like I found out through one of the letters that like they had seen something she posted about me on her Twitter account. So like it referenced her own Twitter account to her. And like it was very strange. Like hers were less serious, I would say. Like hers were shorter, and just because we were closer, I think that it was, I don't know why they were shorter. But then the one in London was probably the one that made me the most angry, because she was a newer friend of mine, and it basically laid out the whole, her mom wanted an abortion, her dad was the one who fought to keep her, she's disrespected him so much, like he loves her and she's locking him out of her life. And so she just gave me the letter and was like, we're fine, we should go get drinks later.
What was life like for you right after you graduated college?
Life was good. I moved to Arizona, which was like the first time I'd ever been far away from home and not at college. It was, I was poor but happy, like every 21-year-old is. And it was pretty good. I was just really focused on starting off my career on the right foot. And I was really excited for just a fresh start of not anyone but my parents knowing my address, honestly. So I felt very relaxed in that time period. Like, Arizona is a beautiful place to live. The sun is literally always shining. I like was finally out of college and had a job, and I just felt very settled in my life. And it was really just a really exciting time.
When did you receive the first letter after college?
It was September, and I walked into my office, and the secretary was like, hey, this came for you. And I was like, I hope to God it is not a bill. Like, that was my first response, is like, I can't do this. Please let it be not a bill. I just assumed it was some form of paperwork that I had to fill out for work. And then she handed me a card, and I immediately, before I looked at it, saw the like chicken scratch writing on the envelope and was like, oh my God. I basically like looked at the card, and something to note about those letters is like all of the envelopes, like some of them were typed, some of them were like written, but the person, whenever they wrote it, I don't know if it was multiple people writing it or if it was one person. It almost looked like if you took your non-dominant hand and tried to write, like they would constantly switch up their handwriting. It looked like a 5-year-old wrote it half the time. And I think that was to like throw me off of like trying to track their handwriting, but I don't even think that I would know how to do that. So I saw the like bad handwriting on the front and just like looked at my boss and the rest of my team and was like, I'm just going to go like get a coffee. Like, does anyone want a coffee? Because there was a Dunkin' Donuts like 2 doors down. And I was like, I'll be right back. Like, just give me like 5 minutes. And I like went to my car and just like called my parents and was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, what do I do? What do I do? How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. And my parents were like, okay, take a deep breath. What you need to do is go in there and tell your boss. And I was like, absolutely not. I am not telling my boss about this. Like, I am 22 years old. I have worked here for less than 4 months. Like, I'm not going to like complicate my employment with my manager. Also, my manager at the time was like a very stoic man, and he was really nice, but he and I just, we didn't chat about our personal lives. So I was like, hell no. And my mom was like, Heather, Julia, get your butt in there and go tell your boss. And I was like, fine. And I hung up the phone and I walked in. I'll never forget this moment. I just knocked on his door and I was like, do you have a minute? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, closed the door behind me, and he was like, are you putting in your 2 weeks? And I was like, what? No. Like, I was like, I'm actually, no, I'm not quitting. I'm just being anonymously stalked. So we need to talk about that instead. I got this letter, and something you guys don't know about like me is like, I grew up like having a restraining order against my father. It actually just expired, and all through college, like I got these letters, and like I don't think anyone's going to show up here, but like I just need to like make you aware of this. And he basically just like stared me straight in the face and didn't know what to say. And I was just like, do you think I could work from home the rest of the day? And he was like, yeah, you should do that. You're fine. You're good. Go. And I just like was like, okay, thanks. And I just like, it was a Friday, so I just like went home for the weekend and like came back Monday. And the next Monday he was like, are you okay? I feel like I didn't respond to that. Like I just was really taken back, and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. So it didn't really end up changing a lot for me, but what really frustrated me about that is it forced me to bring my personal life to work when like that was never my intention. Like I just wanted to go in and work and like maybe have a couple of office friends and then go home. Like I just wanted, like it was, I just remember feeling really defeated and feeling like I was never going to get away from it. Having to sit there and explain it to my boss is like one of like the worst memories I have, honestly.
Did you go back to the police at all?
Yeah, so I actually went to the police every single time I got a letter. So I went to the police in New York where I grew up. I went to the police in Indiana. I went to the police in London. And FYI, if you ever have a legal issue like that in London, you're not a citizen, so there's not much they can do unless you're in imminent danger. I basically was just like, I just have to be here. I just have to give you this. Like, we both know this is not going to be a thing, but like, I'm going to go. And then I had to go to the police in Arizona as well. And they all kind of did the same thing. They talked to me for 5 minutes about it. Kind of were like, what do you think we need to do? And I was like, I don't know what you can do. And they basically were like, me neither. Made a photocopy. And essentially what I didn't realize at the time, but which is very freaky to look back at, is that I was basically building a case in case something happened to me. And the realization of that was very scary when I realized that when I was probably 20. So I just did the same thing. They made a photocopy and I went home.
Emotionally, what kind of toll did this take on you from the time you were 17 to the time you graduated college?
I would say that's a good question. I would say it took a pretty large toll on me emotionally. I'm thankful for the fact that I had been in counseling before all of this happened. So I had like the basic coping mechanisms to deal with stressful and really hard things like this. I think there's like several different prongs of this, and one is I didn't want to give anyone a reason to not want to be in my life. Like telling my friends was always really scary because like at what point is it just like not worth it and like you lose friends over it, which luckily never happened to me, but I just didn't want to be branded that like weird girl who has a stalker. And I've just always strived to be like so normal that like it just like was that was obviously really difficult. And then it also just was really frustrating because I felt like I'd had a really hard childhood and I worked really hard to overcome that. And I felt like I'd kind of done everything right. And like had gotten a restraining order. I'd done all this stuff. And I just remember looking at my parents one day and being like, is it ever going to be over? Because I just wanted it to be over. And I just wanted to be able to like be happy and live a normal life and not have this like weird baggage attached to every single thing I did. And then I think also like on top of that too, it is scary. I pushed down how scary it was for a while, but like I every time, like ever since I had the restraining order, I have looked over my shoulder constantly. Like it might not be like front of mind, but I just like always have just had this feeling of like never being fully relaxed. Like, and then it also really fractured some of my relationships with family. I don't even know that they know that it fractured them, but like I was not being myself around half my family for 6 or 7 years of my life because I was scared to tell anyone who wasn't like 5 or 6 people really important information. And then there's just the fear of like kind of like that realization that you're building a case in case someone hurts you. Like that's like at 21, that is like the scariest thing ever. And I was living alone for the first time and I wasn't sleeping very well. I didn't sleep for probably like 3 or 4 days after I got that letter, like more than like 4 hours a night, probably like tossing and turning. But I think like as much as it's scary, like I think I've internally sort of minimalized the ways it's affected me just because I've kind of just absorbed that into like how I go about life. But when you like sit and you like look at all of it linearly, like you kind of have to look back at the ways that it like kind of picked at you. And I think honestly it just chipped away at my mental health for a really long time. Like I just always felt stressed and anxious.
Were any of the letters ever threatening or had any threats in them?
No, not outward threats. Like it was never like a I'm gonna find you, but it was more just like a I know where you are, I know what you're doing. If needed, I can screw with your employment, with your friends. Like it was more just like a power. Like I had an internship junior year, and like one of the letters, like they pretended that they knew someone at my internship, which was for a pharmaceutical company, like a big company, which like they did not know that person. There's absolutely no way they knew that person. But just like little things like that where it was always like if I really want to blow your life up, I can. So it wasn't like a will hurt you physically, but there was always that like how far will they go? Like what will they do? And like my biggest concern with like the letter I got to my employment is like, what if they send a letter to corporate? Which is such a dumb thing in the grand scheme of your health and safety, but like I just wanted to like have a normal work experience and not have someone from corporate call me and be like, so we found out that like your family is like really traumatic. And I was like, okay. But it was never threatening. It was more just like wielding power over me, I think.
How many letters would you say you had gotten through high school and college?
If you count the ones that went to my friends, I would say minimum 30.
Do you think anyone in your family currently is still potentially giving information to your estranged father?
Yeah, that's honestly a very relevant point for me. So there have been a few people in my family who have recently reconciled with him after like 10 years of not speaking. And that's been a really big pain point in my family. Like I have fought with people about it pretty extensively. And that's obviously really stressful because there's like 2 people I can think of off the top of my head who like recently were like, oh, I want to have a relationship with him. And I'm like, okay, but I don't necessarily trust the knowledge aspect of it. Like, and it's not like I think they're going to go to him and say, here's everything about Heather's life, but I can just see like over dinner, him being like, oh, how's Heather? And them being like, oh, good, she has a new boyfriend. Like, or something like really off-handed that like the average person would not think is new. And then next thing I know, like whoever I'm dating maybe gets a letter. Like I don't, it's very like, it's hard to draw that line in the sand, but that's something that I worry about most days.
What do you want your family to know about your experience?
I think I want my parents to know that like I appreciate them and they were right, because I think I gave them a lot of pushback at the time about having to like take all those measures, and growing up and becoming more of an adult and looking back, like I can just see how fiercely they had my back the entire time. And like I have, my parents are the two most awesome people I know. My mom and I butt heads all the time. Like we literally cannot agree on a shoe color, I don't think. But she is like the best mom in the world, and she always like dropped everything to handle this and like pushed me to do the stuff I didn't want to do. So I think as far as my parents go, I would just like them to know I'm grateful for them. And I think for the rest of my family, I think that it's not something I talk about often, but it's still a very present issue for me. I think that a lot of them have adopted like a forgive and forget mentality, so to speak. And like, there is no forgetting for me. Like, it's still something that just because I haven't gotten a letter, someone said to me recently, not someone in my family, but someone said, oh, aren't you so glad that's done? And I was like, I'm not sure that it is. So I think it's only done because I've taken so many measures to make it be temporarily done that it's a little chaotic. But I think that I would just want them to know that it's, I don't think it's necessarily over, and there's a reason why I'm so guarded with information, and there's a reason why I'm really apprehensive every time someone else wants to reconcile with my dad.
Have you ever tried to reach out to your father and see if it was him?
What's funny is all of this started with like, this is because I posted like a TikTok as a joke about like the experience of it, because like I didn't think it would like, I thought three of my friends would see it and we would move on with our lives. And it ended up like five or six people were like, you need to go on Strictly Stalking. And like a lot of the comments that I've gotten on that video were like, have you ever tried to confirm it? And the answer I always give is that that would just do so much more harm than good. Like, whether it's for a good reason or a bad reason, I have done such a good job of distancing myself from that, where picking up the phone, I haven't spoken to my dad since I was 16, and I just turned 25. So like picking up the phone and making that phone call or like sending a letter, it would almost just feel like I'm asking to have that door be reopened, whereas it's just healthier for me to just, as long as I'm not in any imminent danger, just try to move on with my life.
Tell me about making the TikTok video and why you did it, what you wanted to accomplish.
Um, Honestly, at the time, I had like 200 followers on TikTok, and a lot of my TikTok are just stupid videos. Like, I'm the funny one of my friends, honestly. Like, I'm probably the most creative one. Like, my friend said that to me the other day. She was like, "Well, you're the funny one." I was like, I don't know about that, but I think that I always just try to put stuff up on social media that'll make people laugh. And among my friends, there's no one who doesn't know this story. So I like made this video. There's this sound going around that people use to tell these crazy stories. And I did it thinking that just they would see it and they'd be like, oh my God, that's so funny, like crazy. And then it ended up like, I think right now it has like almost 700,000 views. Like a lot of people have seen it. And a lot of people were asking me to explain and make a part two. And I wasn't going to do it because I just don't, I like the risk of putting that stuff up on social media, it like makes me nervous. But a lot of people were commenting that similar things had happened to them, and that like they had had a similar experience, or like something different but similar had happened to them. So I think then my goal of doing that was just shifting to, explain the story and explain that like, even though people aren't talking about it, like it could be happening to someone else. Like like a few people have DM'd me to like talk about their experiences, and our experiences are so similar that I would have killed for that when I was 17. I would have actually killed to have someone who understood what was happening. that like being on the podcast and like making those videos and stuff has really shifted toward like opening the door for other people to talk about stuff that's happened to them as well.
What advice do you have for someone who's being stalked?
My advice for anyone who is going through a stalking situation like this is don't minimize what's happening to you. I think that because I was never being followed or being threatened or in any danger, I was really quick to just not only just brush it off from a law perspective, but minimize it inside of myself and be like, why are you so anxious? Like, you're fine. No one's going to threaten you. Like, it's just some stupid letter. You know who it's coming from. And I think, you know, my experience of what I thought stalking was before all of this was like someone's obsessed with you. They're standing outside of your house. They won't stop calling you. And this made me realize that it can take several different forms. So one, don't minimize it within yourself and let yourself feel how you feel about it without guilting yourself that you're not in more danger than anyone else. But also take it seriously with a law perspective. Like, it might feel really repetitive and really dumb to go to the police every time, but you really do need to, because you never know when the situation is going to escalate. And also, it's not anything to be embarrassed about. I think I hid it a lot because I felt like it was my fault and it was really embarrassing. And I was worried that my friends would be worried for themselves and not want to be my friends anymore. But, you know, it's not your fault. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. And any friends who are worth having will stick by you through whatever you're going through. And it's really important to have that support system when you're dealing with something that heavy.
Did the police ever do anything other than just take a quick report?
No, they did not. And I think that they're just really tied from a legality standpoint. Like, a lot of comments on that video too were like, get a PI, like go get fingerprints. And the mail system is a very clever way to stalk someone through. Like, it is, like, you can't set up surveillance outside of every post office. You can't monitor people's mail. Like, people have a lot of rights with that stuff. And, you know, they need like warrants to fingerprint. So until my life was being actually threatened, their hands were kind of tied. But no police action ever came from it, unfortunately.
When was the last time you received a letter? How long ago was it?
It was September of 2017, so it's almost been 3 years.
And are you in fear that you'll receive more letters?
I think so. Yeah, I think that I'm always really anxious about it. Like, I always make sure that my addresses aren't on like yellow pages or anywhere. But, you know, I think that when something like that happens to you for so long, it's hard not to feel like it's not over. I'm really hopeful that it's over. Like, I hope that, you know, my father has found peace with the situation and gotten help and like really found a life that he's happy in, to the point where he doesn't feel the need to do that anymore. But yeah, I'm optimistically apprehensive is what I always say about it, where I'm hopeful that it's not going to happen again, but I'm prepared for it too. But I think that I've basically done everything I can to protect myself and stop it from happening.
How have you had to change your life in terms of privacy and things like that because of these letters?
Yeah, I've had to change a bit. I mean, there are certain members of my family who aren't allowed to have access to my social media. I've kept all of my addresses really private. I'm careful with what I post. So much to my parents' chagrin, my social media profiles are public, but that's just because I want to know what's out there. And I basically made them public, but I don't post anything that I wouldn't want to be public knowledge. So to me, that was a safer way than having it private, because that way I might have more comfortability to post things but not know who's seeing them. Whereas now, if everything's out in the open, I just, you know, anything that's on social media is something that I wouldn't care if my employer saw. I wouldn't care if anyone in my family saw. I wouldn't care if, I don't know, like the Pope saw. There's just really, I just try to be really transparent with it. So for a while, I deleted my Twitter and Facebook for a while. I had my Instagram super private. And then after I turned 21, I kind of changed it up a little bit just to feel a little bit more comfortable about day-to-day life.
So what do you want to happen to your stalker?
Honestly, no one's ever asked me that. You know, I just want him to be healthy and happy and safe and live such a great life. I'll honestly never rule out having a relationship again, but every time something like this happens, it just adds 5 or 10 years to the timeline for me. Like every time I get set back with not respecting my privacy or control, or basically just showing that he doesn't care about me or what I want, it just adds to the stuff I have to work through. But honestly, I still love my dad with all my heart. I don't hate him. I hope that he, finds healing and peace. And I hope that he has people in his life who will show him the love and support that the people in mine have shown me. But I just wish that it didn't take a police order to have my very simple wishes respected that are very reasonable. And I just want him to give me the space to grow into a normal, well-adjusted adult with a healthy life.
Do you think using social media platforms like TikTok to spread awareness about what you're going through to help others is productive?
I do. I maintain that I am far too old to be on TikTok. Like, I am 25. I am a whole adult. I have a 401k. I pay my taxes. It is not for me. But I honestly was so overwhelmed with the people who I felt like resonated with that it really made me think about social media and how that happens. Because these are people you would never connect with just in day-to-day life, where there's so many bad things about social media that I think this is like a really good thing. Because if there's, I got a message from a girl who's like 16 who her best friend was like sending her anonymous mail. And I was just like, talk to your parents. Like, are you okay? Being able to make those connections via social media, I think it really says something about the fact that it's happening to more people than you think it is. And I'm happy that there's a platform for that sort of solidarity and awareness.
Heather, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you guys setting this up.
Thank you. If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
You can watch all of our episodes at youtube.com/strictlystalking.
And now we're on Patreon, where you can sign up for exclusive bonus episodes, live chat sessions, and check out our merchandise. Just go to patreon.com/strictlystalking.
I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.